everyone, and welcome back to another Logs.io training session. My name is Sean Pitts, and today we are going to talk about index failures and field mapping in terms of how these correlate and can wreak havoc on your account. So, for starters, let's take a look at this diagram I have here, and we're going to break down how indices work in Logs.io as well as field mapping. So, what's important to note is every day gets its own index. Meaning August 23rd, which is today, has its own index. August 24th will also receive its own index. These are rolled over at midnight UTC. So if we look at the 23rd's index, this consists of field mapping. When a log is ingested, fields are pulled out from the log either through parsing or through JSON or however you send your data. Then what's happening is it's being written into the OpenSearch field mapping. Now what you see here is service is equal to a string and method is also equal to a string, just for example. Now let's say we send in a log that has service of hello world and then a method which is an object containing value hello. If you can understand what's happening here, a conflict will occur, or what we know as an index failure. So the reason this is occurring is because service equals string and then service is coming in as a string. That's all good. However, method is a string, but now you can see the log that's coming in is now an object, which is going to cause that conflict, and your log will be flattened. If we navigate over into Logs.io, you can see this is what it would look like. We would get a type of Logs.io index failure, and then we would also see that the log message is flattened and nothing is parsed out. This isn't good because if you have visualizations that will rely on a field and it's being flattened, you will not see that in Logs.io or in OpenSearch. So this brings us to what type of field mappings do we have in Logs.io? If you go into the data hub and you go into field mappings, you'll see that every field has a specific data type. For example, client IP has an IP, device has an object, and you can see that some of these are explicitly mapped or dynamically mapped. Now the difference between explicit and dynamic links back to how Logs.io handles indices. Now let's take, for example, what we just spoke about. On the 23rd, the field method is mapped as a string. Now let's say on the 24th, at midnight UTC, when it rolls over, method now comes in as an object. If it is dynamically mapped, what will happen is this method will now become an object and no longer a string. Why is that? Because dynamic refers to the ability to change per index, meaning that when the field mapping is copied over from the 23rd to the 24th, it's saying, okay, this is subject to change. And the first log I send in that day on the 24th will dictate how that field's going to be mapped for that day. What if it's explicit? This changes the game because now method is a string, but when we transfer over the field mapping to the next day, method is still going to remain a string. No matter how the log is sent in on the 24th, it does not care. It's going to say, I expect this to be a string. I don't care how you send it in for this foreseeable future until I make another change to this field mapping through the UI. It's going to be a string. So this will cause a conflict. Now, if I explicitly map this as an object on the 23rd, for example, there will be no conflict here. The mapping will get copied over on the 24th, making it an object on the 24th as well, and there will also be no conflict. Now, you might be asking yourself, how do I mitigate and how do I avoid such collisions? There are a few different ways. The first thing I like to do is understand what type does this field require most often. If I know that I'm visualizing it and relying on it to be a number or a string or an IP, then I'm going to explicitly map it in the field mapping as such. For example, if we look at the method field, we can see that it's explicitly a string. But like my diagram shows, we have an edge case here where the method comes in as an object. How do I want to handle that? Two ways. I can either reach out to support, and what they will do is they will add a parsing on the back end that says, okay, if method comes in as an object, rename that field to method underscore obj, or whatever field name you want. And what it'll do is method will be here in the field mapping. The log will come in as an object. Instead of colliding, it'll go under it, create a new field name, and there will be no collision. The other way is to actually investigate your infrastructure, and I really recommend this as the best practice. If you go into your infrastructure and start to troubleshoot why these edge cases are happening, you can resolve it so you know they're always going to be sent in as the same type. But what's important to note is if it is an edge case, sometimes it's just easier to resolve it through support. You can track these index failures in the logs.io platform by querying type logs.io index failure, and you can query over time. If it's easier for you to visualize this, what you can do is you can remove the column message and then toggle on the index failed reason, and you'll be able to see exactly what's going on in these index failures. In this case, you can see all of them are happening when method is a keyword or string. And if I look at the log that's coming in, I can see it's an object causing that conflict. If you have any questions about field mapping, please reach out to support, and I will see you in the next session. Have a great day.